Hi everyone, welcome to the video series of the subject Advanced Database Management System. Today we are going to see a deadlock recovery technique. In the previous video, we have already seen how to detect deadlock, okay? And we have already seen for it the wait for graph as the algorithm for detecting the deadlock, okay? Now let's see what are the techniques to recover from the deadlock. After detection of deadlock, we need to recover from it. हमें पता चला कि हमारे सिस्टम में डेडलॉक है. We detected it. Now there is a need to recover from it. Following are some ways to recover from a deadlock. Very first one is process termination. To eliminate deadlock, we can simply kill one or more processes or transaction. Okay? Process termination. हम यहाँ पे क्या बोल रहे? हमें पता चला, we found that, we detected that there is a deadlock in the system, and very first thing to recover from the deadlock, we are trying to kill the process because of which the deadlock happened, right? Let's see. For this, we use two methods. What are the two methods? Abort all the processes involved in a deadlock. Next, or we can try to abort one process at a time until the deadlock is eliminated. Okay? So basically, process termination is telling what? Kill the process, right? And how we can kill the process or the transaction? We can abort all the processes or all the transactions those are involved in a deadlock. Or we can try another way, that keep on eliminating the process or keep on killing the process one by one, so that we can find, yeah, this particular time we can go ahead without deadlock, right? The aborting all the process or aborting one process at a time to eliminate the deadlock, right? Next, resource preemption. To eliminate deadlock using resource preemption, we preempt some resources from process and gives those resources to other processes. Okay? Now, what is the meaning of preemption? Preempt means that we are taking away the resources from the process. So, what here it is telling, we can recover from the deadlock by preempting the resource from the process which have caused the deadlock, right? And we can give those resources to the other process. This means what? We are taking away the resources from the process and giving it to the other resource. Okay. Now let's see what is there in the scenario. If preemption is mandatory to deal with deadlocks, then three issues require to be addressed. So preemption is not a simple case over here. Before preempting any resource from any of the process, we must address these issues. Okay, very first one, selection of victim. Which process we must select as a victim so that we can take all the resources from that process. Okay. Given a set of deadlock transaction, we should determine which transaction to roll back to break the deadlock. Okay? Which transaction to be rolled back to break the deadlock, right? Following should be kept in mind for determining the rollback of transaction. Very first one is how many data items the transactions has used. Okay? Here, very important thing. If you are trying to roll back that particular transaction which have excess number of data items, then it is obviously going to give a cost factor, right? We must take those resources which haven't used much of the data items. Okay. Next, how many more data items the transaction needs for it to complete. Okay. Next thing we must consider, the transaction, how many data items more. It might need only one data item to complete a transaction. Okay, so it is very dangerous to roll back this particular transaction. So we have to think before rolling back any of the transaction. Okay, अगर उसे सिर्फ एक डेटा आइटम की ज़रूरत है तो हम इसे हॉल्ट करेंगे. We are not going to roll back this particular transaction. Instead, we are going to make the resources available for this transaction, right? How many transactions will be involved in a rollback? If we are trying to roll back one transaction, we have to also think that after rolling back this transaction, how many transactions are dependent on it? Okay, how many transactions are dependent on it, right? So before rolling back any of the transaction or selecting a transaction as a victim to roll back, we must consider this following points. Okay, how many data items the transactions has used, how many more data items the transaction need for it to complete, how many transaction will be involved in rollback. Let's go ahead and see. Next concept is rollback. Once we decide that a particular transaction must be rolled back, we must determine how far this transaction should be rolled back. The simplest solution is total rollback, that is abort the transaction and restart it. The deadlock detection mechanism should decide which locks the selected transaction needs to release in order to break the deadlock. Okay? So basically, once we decide that a particular transaction must be rolled back, then how far it must be rolled back, okay? The simplest way is to abort the entire transaction and restart later, okay? Next is starvation. In a system where the selection of victim is based primarily on cost factors, it may happen that same transaction is always picked as a victim. As a result, the transaction never completes its assigned task. We must be ensured that a particular transaction is rolled back for a finite terms. Okay, starvation. This starvation is what? That one transaction is selected again and again, again and again if we try to select that transaction, okay, and because of which the assigned task is not complete, definitely it is going to be a very a loss for the system, right? Because of which the transactions or the work is not completed, right? That's why we must make sure that a particular transaction is rolled back for a finite number of times. Okay, since at a point the transaction must given a chance to complete its assigned task, then only the entire system will be a successful system. Okay, so this is how we are going to recover the deadlock, right? We are going to recover from the deadlock. We are going to follow some ways to recover from a deadlock. If you have any doubt, feel free to comment me in the comment section. Thank you.